Happy Friday to all of you. Happy bye week to all of you as Tennessee football is on a bye. Wondering what you guys are all doing on your week off. Dave, as you guys can tell, is still not here. He's in Massachusetts enjoying the October in the Northeast because Halloween is beautiful up there. Just kidding. He's visiting his son. And he's also a Celtics fan, so he's probably happy about the Drew Holiday move. We'll find out when he gets back. Really is a holiday in Massachusetts. But we've got a lot to cover still today, college football related. We're going to talk about what Tennessee should be doing during its bye week. We've got some Kamal Hadden stats to bring you that might be a little bit interesting. We're going to talk about Tennessee's offensive line going forward against the elite defensive lines they're about to face. Looking at the SEC versus the Big Ten in terms of competence, with the Big Ten scheduling out through 2028, and the NCAA's incompetence with their reversal of course on a North Carolina receiver, what that means on a macro scale. And also we're going to talk about Tennessee checkering Neyland for Texas A&M. But first, we are going to bring in, with 99 Win the Sports Animal, Josh Ward. Josh, happy Friday. How's it going?
Doing great. Great to have the weekend upon us.
Yes. We all kind of want to break too, so this is perfect. Josh, you wrote an article, speaking of weeks off, on how Tennessee can take advantage of their bye week. And I just wanted to go through everything real quick, and we'll get to it. But first, on a general sense, what do you think this bye week is at the right time for Tennessee?
Yes, I did start the article talking about the health, and I do want to clarify, as I mentioned, I don't think there is such thing as a bad time for a bye week. Sometimes that will come up. Well, a team's playing well. Do they really want to break? Yes, coaches always want to break. Coaches always want extra time to prepare for the next opponent, and players always want to feel better when they go out and play their next game, and an off week allows that. For Tennessee, I think it's especially true because Joe Milton has not been healthy since he suffered that knee injury against UTSA through the rest of that game and then the South Carolina game. He clearly could not run or move at 100%. I don't know if he'll be 100% against Texas A&M, but another 2 weeks of recovery and rehabilitation will help him be better. So he needed it. The offensive line has needed it with Cooper Mays, who came back to play, but you're telling me he couldn't use a break after his first game as an SEC game following surgery from a month and a half earlier, and then a couple of other players on the offensive line and at other position groups, and they have to figure out what to do at wide receiver without Brew McCoy, receiver and just the overall passing game. He's such a big loss. So timing for health, timing to prepare for the rest of the season works out favorably for Tennessee. Plus, 2 weeks to get ready for A&M while A&M plays a big physical football game this week against Alabama.
Yeah, and Cooper Mays was on Off the Hook with Dave Hooker last Sunday, and he on the Vol report, and he actually said that he was getting a little gassed towards the end of that game. So his conditioning, he definitely needs the 2 weeks to get his conditioning back in. You specifically, and this was the first thing you talked about, getting healthy. And you mentioned the offensive line. You talked Jeremiah Crawford, Andre Carrick, and also you're right, Danico Slaughter getting close to 100%, and Dante Thornton being out last week is also going to be back. Should be back in 2 weeks. Of those, I would assume, we talked about this yesterday, but offensively, Jeremiah Crawford is the one you want back the most, right? I mean, that's an experienced, reliable blocker. And as with we're going to talk about in the next segment with some elite defensive lines coming up, you need a guy like Jeremiah Crawford back, don't you?
Yeah, just to feel better about the depth of the position. My guess is that Mincy holds on to that starting position, but Crawford could rotate in. He can play if there's injury. He's played on both sides of the football, the left and right side. So Tennessee has to expect that there will be injury again, that somebody could go down. You have to prepare for that. So Crawford for sure. I mean, Clark's played a lot. So if something happens to Ollie Lane or they want to rotate there or whatever the case might be, having him available can help the offensive line because the competition's about to get tougher for sure. Texas A&M, Alabama, Kentucky, they know how to play up front. And then a few weeks after that, Missouri's tops in the SEC in rush defense, and then Georgia could be the toughest opponent in this run of games that Tennessee's about to play in terms of what the offensive line is going to face. So, it's just everybody needs it. Dante Thornton's a big one, too, because he needs to play better. Last week, the story I wrote was about players who have been disappointing that need to play at a higher level, and Thornton is who I led the list with, but then he suffered an injury in practice, was not able to make an impact in the South Carolina game. But Tennessee needs him to be closer to the player coaches expected when they brought him in as a transfer from Oregon.
Yeah, I'm. As a matter of fact, I wanted to ask you about that because I've been very critical of Dante Thornton, and a lot of people have tried to give him a pass because they talked about him being banged up. But that's not really an excuse, is it? Because he was messing up before he got hurt and dropping a lot of balls before that, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he's dealing with a hamstring injury, is my understanding, and that came from practice after the UTSA game. He has shown the ability to get open or get down the field. He just hasn't shown the ability to make plays consistently. The Florida game, he had a chance to go up and make a big play on a deep pass from Joe Milton. And I do think if you look back at that play, there was interference from the defense, but I also don't think it affected his ability to go up and catch the football. He just didn't make that play. On the next throw, though, from Joe Milton, he made a great pass down the seam, and Thornton was able to get past his defender and made a play for 40-plus yards. So, again, he's shown that ability, but he hasn't done it consistently. He has not come anywhere close to replacing Jalen Hyatt the way that fans hope. Squirrel White's getting closer to that, right? 9 catches on 9 targets this past week. But we've also heard about Thornton's ability to play on the outside, not just in the slot. And with Brew McCoy out, there is more of that opportunity. So Caleb Webb and Chaz Nimrod are 2 young players, second-year players that will have a chance to help. But Thornton is a player that, assuming he's healthy and ready to play, needs to make the most of his opportunities that have already been there in different spots, but more of those are coming if he makes the most of it.
What you're saying, before I move on, I just have to point this out. What you're saying, though, is you're right. I remember that pass interference play against Florida. Then I remember that catch. That catch was a dime by Joe Milton. Sounds like what you're saying is if there's a 50-50 ball, Dante Thornton is not showing the willingness to go fight for the 50-50 ball, as far as we see at this point.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't on that play. So I'm not saying he can't or won't do it with another shot, but that was something that we've seen the last couple of years players go up and make, or even go back to prior regime and plays that Marquez Callaway was making and Josh Palmer. Those guys made it to the NFL because of what they were able to do going up and getting contested footballs. So Dante Thornton, with his size and athleticism, needs to show that he can make that play as well. It's not always going to be running wide open 5 to 10 yards away from your defender. Sometimes, I mean, 1 or 2 of those plays might be coming his way soon, but you have to go make tough catches too.
Yep, totally agree. Moving on, it actually is a perfect transition to our next one, which is you talk about working on the passing game. And you lead with Tennessee's passing game hasn't clicked this season. And I agree. And I think a lot of people were happy with how comfortable Joe Milton looked last week, but he still threw 2 interceptions, both that were his fault. He didn't read a safety, one, and he underthrew Jacob Warren on the other. So where are you at with the passing game and what they need to work on specifically?
Well, the offense is going to be led by the running game. I already thought that coming into the season, and I think that's been emphasized over the last few weeks. There are ways that the passing game can actually supplement what the running game is trying to do. We've seen them attempt that in the first half of the season, and somebody like Dylan Sampson can help in the passing game. D. Williams, who is another bullet point but can be a part of this conversation, might have an opportunity as a pass catcher in the offense. Somebody that Off the Hook Sports viewers and readers have seen a lot from is Jacob Warren. And he had the touchdown catch, the other opportunity on the underthrown ball. That to me says look for Jacob Warren to have more opportunities. Both Warren and McAllen Castles are going to have an opportunity here. And Castles, I think, has shown the athleticism that excited Tennessee's staff, and he has the ability. He's another one that needs to be more consistent, can't drop the football, needs to make plays because the ball is going to come his way. And then let's see if Webb and or Nimrod. I like Caleb Webb a lot in terms of his ability, of what he can do. And those guys have worked with Joe Milton in practice a lot because if you remember in the spring, Tennessee's top players, including Brew McCoy, were either limited or out during the spring, and none of those guys played in the spring game. So we saw Caleb Webb make a big catch down the field and then score a touchdown. We saw him score a touchdown a few weeks ago. And the coaching staff truly believes in their ability, but can they do it against big-time SEC competition? It comes back to that question. I've also thrown out a lot of names here before I've even gotten back to Squirrel White or mentioned Ramel Keaton. Those are still 2 of the first guys I look to. Squirrel's probably going to lead the team in targets the rest of the way. I think that's a pretty safe bet. And then Keaton has played a lot. He had to step up last year when Tillman went down. Keaton's been in the starting role this season, but my guess is that Joe will look to him a little bit more often. So Keaton needs to step up as a senior and make some plays for Tennessee too, which I believe he knows.
Yep, and Keaton's always been he's Mr. Reliable to me. I told Dave he's kind of like the Jermaine Copeland was of the 98 national title team, where Jermaine Copeland wasn't going to be a go-to guy, but he was always there to make a play when you needed him to. Moving on, speaking of the offense, you talked about prepare D. Williams for an increased role. Is it rumors, or is Tennessee serious about maybe putting him on offense?
I think it's serious. Austin Price was on our radio show this week and said he thinks D's days on defense, that's really difficult to say, are probably over at Tennessee, and he'll get a look on offense. Now, there's a lot that goes into trying to play in this offense. I know it's player friendly in terms of creating opportunities, but the offense itself is not all that easy to get used to if you're a newcomer to it. So getting used to the tempo, being able to run multiple plays, because you look at their rotation doesn't often exist within a series unless they run several plays, and you'll see a player tap his helmet, needs to get out of there to get somebody fresh in. But Tennessee wants to go quickly without subbing, so that means that D needs to be ready to run a few plays. Catching the football is not the same as a receiver versus as a return man. So there are differences, but the bye week, which is part of the conversation here, or the lead of it, allows a little extra time to create acclimation. What I do know is that D. Williams with the football is electric, and D. Williams on the field with other playmakers that we've talked about in Tennessee's offense could create quite the challenge for opposing defensive coordinators. Simply trotting D. Williams out there might cause confusion for an opposing defender, which leads to any of these guys we've talked about breaking wide open if there's miscommunication on the other side of the ball. If Williams is a weapon, and we know that he is in the return game, why not give him a look with a little extra time to prepare and injury concerns at receiver on offense?
Yep, I agree. And if you just use him one time, even on a jet sweep, all of a sudden you totally change how the defense is going to operate against him.
Yeah.
Moving on to number 4, in-game communication. You brought up a little bit of the offensive coordinator situation. Are you questioning Joey Halzle at this point in term compared to Alex Golesh?
I just know that we've watched at different times, especially at Florida, and that's a road game. But guess what? They go to Alabama. They go to Kentucky here in the month of October. And Missouri, again, that can't be just checked off as an automatic win. Tennessee can look back at the start of the season and say, okay, what's working? Where do we need to improve? Where do we maybe run into issues in the middle of the game? And how can we get better at those issues? And the offense is where I start that conversation, because there was obvious change from Alex Golesh to Joey Halzle, and that changes the line of communication a little bit. So they can figure out where they need to get better moving forward through the rest of the season. I mentioned special teams as well, because there have been some mistakes on special teams, and several times that's included freshmen. So they're learning, and you hope that they learn from those mistakes, like against UTSA, where Selden and T-Lander had some either penalties or a mistake by Selden going after the football. Learn from that so you're better prepared for the rest of the season. But part of this, I don't even know what they would uncover. I don't know exactly what the line of communication is, but I know that they do, and they can figure out what's working and where they can get better. So it would be, the self-scouting category. That's what I'm talking about here. What's working, what isn't, and how can we get better? 3 simple questions to ask after the first 5 games so that you can improve over the next 7.
Yep. The one thing I might push back a little bit on is Florida. It was a road game, but they also, again, Ollie Lane at center. The communication was just not the same without Cooper Mays in there.
Cooper being back definitely helps with that for sure.
Right. And even last year, I think just with the way this tempo and this offense is run, they're on the road. There are going to be communication issues sometimes, particularly at night games on the road in the SEC. I mean, how many penalties did they have at Georgia? And I don't care what Georgia fans say, Sanford Stadium is not loud.
But if they don't clean that up, then they're going to lose again. That's the point. I mean, at Georgia, tough because of the place and the talent, but they were affected by the environment. South Carolina, when things didn't go well, it got worse as the game went along. And I know about the Hendon injury, but then with Florida, I mean, it was just even coming out of the half, like when they had to call a timeout because Joe was trying to audible or change something at the line as the play clock was running out. I mean, that's on the opening drive of the third quarter. So that wasn't a first series issue. That was 2 quarters in that they were trying to figure that out. So if those problems continue, the losses will add up as well.
Yep, good point. Last one you brought up is this kind of ties into it also is reps for young players. And we've talked about Chaz Nimrod, Caleb Webb. You mentioned Arian Carter and Jeremiah Tellander. Want to dive in on who you think which young player you want to see get the most increase in reps?
Yeah, well, it's all of them, and I could have listed a bunch of names in the column. Carter and Telander, I think, are obvious because they are already playing. They were on the field together against South Carolina when the game was still on the line, not fourth quarter. Hey, we're up by 21. Let's let those guys run out there together. Playing in the red zone, the talent is real, and I think Carter and Telander have both earned trust from the coaching staff. Now it's about learning more and being more comfortable in the SEC. I saw a question, by the way. This is kind of just adding in when maybe Dave shared the column that I did, and the question was about Keenan Peely. Is he out for the season? Is he not coming back soon? I think it's still a few weeks away. So Tennessee's preparing to have Aaron Beasley as a starter. Elijah Herring will continue to play. Caleb Perry factors in. He's another young player. Just because he's a sophomore doesn't mean he's played a ton yet. But then Carter and Telander are guys that they are preparing to play more this season and play a lot next year. But I think it's every position group. You know, David Hobbs on the defensive line is a guy that they really believe in with what he can become in the future. The offensive line is a huge question for next year. So guys like Vyson Lang and Umarov and some of the second-year players who we've not heard that much about, they need as much practice time as they can get. And then quarterback's pretty obvious here, right? You have Joe Milton and then Nico. And that's it among scholarship quarterbacks. And Nico hasn't gotten to play much this season because the offense hasn't given him as much of an opportunity as he should have, especially in that Austin Peay game. He didn't see the field. That's a loss for the season, not on the record, but in terms of opportunity that Nico didn't get to play. But if Joe's been dealing with the knee issue, he needs some rest. It's a chance for Nico to get some more practice reps and a reminder that if something could happen to Joe again where he's not able to go back into the game like he was against UTSA. They dodged a bullet in that one. But 7 games to go, tougher competition. There is absolutely no guarantee Joe's going to be the quarterback the rest of the way because of health. That's why they need to get Nico ready. Plus, they're, of course, preparing for him to be the guy next year.
Josh, have you ever been told this before? Robert Rexroad says that you look like a young Gandalf.
Gandalf, this is my first one, but I'll take it. I don't know if it's my look or the lighting. I'm not, or
not your wisdom,
gray, but that's more the lighting, I would say.
I think it's your wisdom.
Wisdom, yeah. Well, that would definitely be the first time that I've heard that brought up.
If there was a one ring that was tempting in the Tennessee football program, what would that one ring be? What's the analogy to the one ring? Something Tennessee football just chases and loses itself in the process doing.
Well, I mean, Gainesville is part of that conversation, but we don't know when they're going back there. Now it's Georgia, right? I mean, you broke the losing streak against Alabama last year. I know Tennessee lost to Florida this year, but the streak ended, their latest streak. So it's Georgia in the East.
Yep, that's probably right. Yes, beating Georgia is their precious.
Yeah. Well, and, they need a win against Texas A&M because the last couple of games since Texas A&M has joined the SEC, the Vols lost in 16 in overtime, and then that was Jeremy Pruitt's final game as Tennessee's head coach in 2020. So there's a little bit of A&M bad juju that Tennessee needs to wipe away a week from Saturday.
And that's a perfect transition because where I'm going with this is for our next topic. Tennessee is about to play Texas A&M and then Alabama. Far and away, the 2 best front fours they'll have seen all year. Florida's not a bad front four, but everybody's excited about Tennessee's rushing offense. But I think South Carolina doesn't have a good front four, and then their other 3 wins are against bad defensive lines. Is this offensive line, have they shown enough to you, Josh, that they're equipped to handle a defensive line like Texas A&M, or do we know yet?
We don't know yet. What they did against South Carolina is encouraging because it's the first game with Cooper Mays back, and I think he's so good and so important for Tennessee. So having seen that and what we just talked about with the offensive line, a little bit more time to work and rest and get better, and the A&M game, the next test being at home. So a better chance to succeed. That makes me feel pretty good about Tennessee's chances. But to run like they did against South Carolina, no, because I also saw the Florida game where they had a tough time, and I don't think Cooper would have fixed everything there. So it's the biggest question. I mentioned where Missouri ranks. If you look at the next few weeks, I think 5 of the top 6 rush defenses. Right? No, it's 5 of the top 6 are the next 5 games for Tennessee in conference play. Vanderbilt's not a concern. Everybody else is a bigger challenge, I think, potentially than what Tennessee has seen so far. I'll also add in Missouri obviously has to play better competition. So they may not be the best, but that's a sign that they're probably improved from where they've been the last couple of years. That's also later on. You're asking about A&M and Alabama, rightfully so, because their personnel is filled with future NFL players. And that is a bigger deal for Tennessee than what the Vols have seen in the first month of the season. So I don't know. I don't know what Tennessee's offensive line or rushing attack is going to do. And that's part of the reason that improving the passing game is so important, because expecting 200 plus yards on the ground each of these games would probably be unfair. So at some point, Tennessee will need to step up and make plays in the passing game, because if that doesn't happen, then opposing defenses are going to spend even more time focusing on taking Tennessee's run away and saying, okay, let's see you do it down the field, because you haven't yet this year.
Yeah, and the one time they were tested up front was the first half against Florida, and let's be honest, they couldn't run the ball well against Florida. Now, I know Cooper Mays was out, but that's got to be a concern, right? They really didn't get the running game going until the second half.
Yeah, and Florida said, we'll give you a light box here. Until you show that you can run against this, we're not going to challenge it anymore. And Tennessee couldn't find success. Also, getting down in that game was probably a factor. We talked so much about how Tennessee performs in the first quarter early in games. Josh Heupel's history says he needs to either get up or be in a neck-and-neck game where they can continue to push the issue with the run game. If Tennessee feels like it needs to come back through the air, it's not happened yet for Josh Heupel, anywhere he's been as a head coach. So things can always change. Nothing's done until it is. But Tennessee's offense, to me, needs to be driven by the running game. And if the running game goes away, then we have really big concerns about Tennessee's offense this year.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's funny you say that, because I think a lot of people were complaining that Tennessee was sticking to the run game in the second half against Florida because they wanted him to desperately throw to try to come back. But as you know, Heupel's offense doesn't work that way. You can't just throw your way back into a game. You have to commit to the run if you're going to, if this for those wide open, deep downfield passes to be there, you have to commit to the run in Josh Heupel's offense.
Right. Jalen Wright has been really good, and Dylan Sampson didn't play against Florida. Yeah, that's another aspect. We talked about the offensive line. Sampson could have potentially helped maybe in the running game, but also as a receiver who we know can get the football, make guys miss, and make big plays, which that offense needed a few weeks ago. But that's in the past. We know that Tennessee is using Dylan Sampson more, and I'm sure will continue to do that. And that's going to be the strength of this offense. So as much as we're talking about all the different options in the passing game, and maybe it starts to come together, it's just that, Caleb, if it didn't happen with weaker competition, expecting it to be a lot better against these teams that Tennessee is about to face seems a little unrealistic. So can the offense improve with the passing game? I'm sure it can improve, but at this point, I have no reason to believe that Tennessee will be what it was last year, where Hendon Hooker was leading the SEC in yards per attempt and making big-time plays consistently, where they were just destroying teams, even though they had an idea what was coming with Jalen Hyatt. Like the Kentucky game, Mark Stoops had plenty of time to tell his players, here's what they're going to try to do with Jalen Hyatt to get him open, and Kentucky's defense couldn't do anything about it. We've yet to see anything with Tennessee's offense this year to say that it can be that kind of force through the air.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because if anything has proven that Mel Kiper is phoning it in on the draft, it's Tennessee this year, because of his claim that Hendon Hooker is a system quarterback and anybody looks as good in that system. Totally disproven at this point, right? Hendon Hooker was on a league of his own as a quarterback in this system.
Yeah, this season has helped the case for Hendon Hooker as a pro prospect separated from the offense. And we'll see what happens with Hendon either in Detroit or wherever, depending on what they do with that position. But, honestly, I thought over the last 2 years, Hendon was getting a lot of pub, and maybe last season was closer to getting the attention and respect he deserved, because a lot of people were banging the drum of put this guy in New York for the Heisman. And obviously he wasn't there. He finished 5th, and the voting had to be top 4. But too much of the time, especially 2 years ago, I thought that Hendon deserved more credit because so much was pointed to the offense itself. And, Hendon's just come in there and he's benefited from the offense. Yes, Hendon benefited from the offense. Josh Heupel deserves plenty of credit, but Hendon was a special player for Tennessee. It wasn't just his physical ability, his ability to lead, his ability to galvanize his teammates, and for them to get on the same page. Hendon had a special ability to make that happen.
Yep. Josh, before we let you out of here, the last thing I wanted to ask you related to this is, I think the biggest question for Tennessee up front, Tennessee's offensive line, is going to be at left guard, isn't it? I mean, Andre Carrick really struggled the first 4 games, and Ollie Lane moved over there because Carrick was hurt and Cooper Mays was back at center. Ollie Lane struggled, but also Ollie Lane hadn't been practicing at left guard. If they're going to run the ball, they got to fix that one position, right? And they're really missing Jerome Carvin right now.
Yeah, I think left guard's probably the biggest question moving forward, but the left guard performance should be better if John Campbell plays at a higher level like we know he's capable of, or at least I believe that he is, and then Cooper is there at center. If Ollie Lane is the left guard moving forward, that's his more natural position as opposed to playing center, and he's going to be better with Cooper there in the middle. I think Mincy's the right tackle moving forward, and that gets us closer to the conversation we had in June and July leading up to the start of the season when we were talking about having to replace Darnell Wright, who was so spectacular for Tennessee last year, and then also Jerome Carvin. But Mincy at right tackle and John Campbell Jr. at left tackle keeps the floor at a pretty high level, I think, for Tennessee. And then Cooper and Spraggins are 2 guys that will give what Tennessee's coaches expect. So I think that can make the overall offensive line performance a lot better. Jacob Warren in the run game can help a lot. And then McAllen Castles has to be important there too. So it's not just the offensive line when we talk about what needs to happen for Tennessee to run with success. It obviously starts there. And having Cooper Mays back to starts a whole new conversation for what this offensive line can be.
Yeah, it's crazy to point out that the 2020 Tennessee football team went 3-7 and had Darnell Wright, Trey Smith, and Cade Mays up front. I mean, that's just insane to think about.
Yeah, Wanya Morris. I mean, they had that offense itself had NFL players all over the place. Ty Chandler and Eric Gray are both active NFL players right now. The receiving core was complete with NFL players, and I know what fans' opinions are of Jarrett Garantano. He has NFL money in his bank account. So that entire offense was filled with NFL players, and it was a disaster. And that was not all the players' fault, I can promise you.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. Josh, thanks so much for doing this with me today. I know it was a little bit tricky with Dave out, and thanks for moving your schedule around. You doing anything fun this weekend without having to cover a game?
Still watching football for sure. The season rolls on. Can scout some, right? Tennessee's next 2 opponents play each other, so we'll get a better idea of them, and huge narrative game for where things move on with the SEC West, and a little bit of family time this weekend too. So yeah, hope everybody enjoys the off week and gets ready for a big 7-week run after this weekend.
Yep, sounds good. Thanks a lot, Josh. You have a great weekend.
Thanks, Caleb.
That was Josh Ward of 99.1 The Sports Animal. Portions of the program brought to you by Andy Mason Real Estate. For the best prices and service in real estate in Knoxville, there's just one place to go, andymasonrealestate.com. Andy and his partners have been in the real estate business for a combined 40 years. They know how the market works and how to save you tens of thousands of dollars. Andy Mason at andymasonrealestate.com. When we come back, Tennessee is checkering Neyland for Texas A&M. And Kamal Hadden, I told you guys to give him more respect. And I got some data to back it up now. I'm going to talk about both of those things. Stick with us. We will be back in 2 minutes.
Got cataracts? We can fix that. Never miss another moment. With a little help from Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn at cctis.com.
Our family has been creating one-of-a-kind pieces of jewelry in West Knoxville since 1986. Each piece is a combination of unique processes that bring your idea to life. Every day in our shop, a truly special item with a story all its own is being manufactured in our facility, bringing the history and family sentiment into a whole new generation of life. We're grateful that you chose us to be Knoxville's best jeweler, a title that we value and respect. Because to me, being a jeweler and owning a jewelry store are not the same thing. I'm Rick Terry. I'm a jeweler, and we want to be your jeweler. Kingston Pike and Campbell Station Road in the heart of Farragut, and downtown on Gay Street right next to the Tennessee Theater.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare.
These mountains hold and defend a spirit far better than moonshine. A drink that holds flavor that becomes necessity. A hard cider made and relished by folk who are as hearty as they are legend. A refreshment that can only be found in one place. With a taste that makes you say, give me 3 bottles of the good stuff. Tennessee Cider Company, where necessity can be found.
Welcome back, everybody. Before we get moving on, I want to get to a few things said on the message board. Have a little fun here. Smoky Mountain Red says, morning, everyone. Sorry, Smoky Mountain Red. That was not the post I was trying to pull up of you. It was actually this one. Coop would have been the difference maker in the Florida game. Totally agree. I told Dave that Monday after the Florida game, I said, if Tennessee has Cooper Mays or Hendon Hooker or is playing that game at home, if one of those 3 things was true, Tennessee's winning that game, despite how bad the game started. I do think Tennessee's winning that game if one of those things is true. Playing the game on the road messed up their communication, which is why they couldn't run the ball, which messed up their whole offense. Cooper Mays being out, also why they couldn't run the ball, messed up their whole offense. One of those 2 things is fixed. They're running the ball well. They control the clock in the first half. And if Hendon Hooker's there, he's able to convert on some throws, even with the running game taken away. The running game opens up a lot more. So totally agree with you guys. Cooper Mays being in there would have been the difference maker. Travis is suggesting that A&M is going to get beat up on Biden, I think is what you meant, Travis. And then you said just right for UT. That's probably what UT's hoping for. This is going to be a physical game. And the question becomes, can Texas A&M's front 4 withstand playing Tennessee's offensive line a week later when Tennessee's offensive line has had a week off, and it's going to be in Knoxville? Perhaps that's why the line is Tennessee by, I believe, 7 as of right now. Obviously, that line is going to change probably depending on what happens in the Alabama game. But as I've told you guys before, Vegas does not get fooled, or Vegas does not overreact to 1 week's worth of games. They still know how to analyze and break down teams. My guy Josh Pate over at Late Kick Josh, affiliated with 247 Sports and CBS, has actually suggested that Vegas lines be used for strength of schedule. And so that's kind of intriguing. Another post here. I assume you refer to Tennessee. Actually won 3/4 of the game. Just got thumped in the second quarter. Yeah, it was towards the end of the first quarter. It was right after that touchdown run that was given up for Florida to not really tie the game because they missed the extra point, but effectively tie the game. I just think there was a total wilting by Tennessee at that point. And look, the Florida game, guys, there's a psychological factor. People ask if a lot of times a program is cursed against another program. Kentucky, are they cursed against Tennessee? Tennessee, are they cursed against Florida? I don't think it's a curse. I think at some point it just starts to, the campus culture and the way the campus feels about the game seeps into the mindset of the players. So they tighten up. They wilt a little more if something goes just slightly wrong. I think that's how the Florida game consistently works for Tennessee. Okay, so moving on. Some news came out, speaking of Texas A&M, that Tennessee is going to checker Neyland for Texas A&M. For those who don't know, checker Neyland is where the stadium looks like a giant checkerboard. One section is orange, one section is white, one section is orange, one section is white. Looks like a checkerboard. Tennessee, every home game at Neyland Stadium this year will have done something different to this point. Against Austin Peay, they wore the Condrich Holloway retro jerseys, but in smoky gray format. So they were smoky grays, but in Condrich Holloway retro format, I guess is what you would say. And UTEP, they wore the all orange. So they didn't wear their traditional orange jersey, white pants. They wore all orange. Last Saturday against South Carolina, they wore their dark mode jerseys for a night game. And then against Texas A&M, I'm assuming they're going to wear their orange with white pants, but they're checkering Neyland. So every single week, they've done something a little bit different. The question becomes, does Tennessee need to go above and beyond to be trendy with things like this and even more, given what's happening across the college football landscape? Now, let me break this down a little bit more. Blue Bloods, in the age of NIL, don't have the inherent advantage that they used to. There's still the locational advantage, but Tennessee never really had that to begin with. Flash is going to sell a little bit. I've been telling people, keep an eye on the Big 12. What's happening in the Big 12 right now? They hired the former Rock Nation executive as their commissioner. They're looking at playing a game in Mexico. They've added Arizona, Arizona State, and Utah for next year, and Colorado, who has Deion Sanders, who is the ultimate Flash. The Big 12 has figured out exactly how to stay competitive with the Big 10 and the SEC in the changing landscape in college football. And when when the conferences inevitably break off and form their own league, the Big 12 teams will be there. Book it, because of how creative and ahead of the curve they've been. Deion at Colorado has people like Lil Wayne coming out with them, had the baby last week, which is controversial. I don't want to get into that, but it's really connecting and getting people that no one thought possible to get in college football to connect with his teams. That's the culture, despite the 2 losses, is having an impact in recruiting. Is Tennessee doing enough from their end to recruit? I'm actually going to say yes. And here's why. They don't have to do what Colorado does, not because of the fact that they're a blue blood or not a blue blood. There's a locational advantage, which is being near Georgia and South Carolina. Not the same locational advantage that the rest of the SEC has, but there is one there. On top of that, Tennessee's got that NIL money. They got the NIL bag, man. And that's huge because they can throw money at players, and the money is going to outweigh the trends or the flash with these kids. Okay, they're going to follow the money. And so, yeah, Lil Wayne may be in your locker room, but you can choose to have Lil Wayne in your locker room or make $300,000 more than you were going to make. It's an easy choice if you're a high school athlete. It just is. So I think Tennessee is actually fine. As a matter of fact, if I'm Tennessee, I caution against going overboard and looking a little desperate and becoming a bit of a laughingstock at that point. Things like, okay, the checkered Neyland works. People want checkerboard uniforms. Don't do it. They look horrible. They look square. They look lame. And you'll be laughed at more than anything for doing that. Just to give you an example, the Terps tried this, incorporating the flag into their uniforms back in 2011 when they had a new coach. They were trying to create a culture. Yeah, Maryland fans loved it. But it was a laughing stock for them across the rest of the country. Now, it didn't help that Maryland went 2-10 that year. If you do this stuff and then you lose, it becomes a pariah. Look at Derek Dooley with the orange pants. The orange pants looked lame from the start, and then Derek Dooley started losing. And so now no one ever wants to see anybody ever wearing orange pants again because of the Derek Dooley situation. The Smoky Grays looked epic. That was one thing where it looked epic. So because they looked epic, they could survive the fact that they were created during the Butch Jones years, because the Smoky Grays fit very well with the backdrop of Neyland Stadium, Knoxville, Tennessee in the fall, the Smoky Mountains. It's beautiful. The dark mode was also, Lane Kiffin started with the dark mode with those jerseys, and those look cool, particularly around Halloween, so it makes sense to bring those back. So overall, I think Tennessee has a base of what it should do to stay trendy. They have old traditions that they stick with, and they mix in some new ones. And I've told you guys for a while, just relying on old traditions is going to lose, because Tennessee's old traditions at one point were new. Tennessee's tradition has been breaking tradition. Remember, running through the T, they never did that under Robert Neyland. That started under Doug Dickey. They were the second school, in the SEC to recruit an African-American player. The first to actually play one significantly. They had the first black quarterback, the first black captain. They were very, very forward-thinking and embracing Title IX, which is why they became the mecca for women's basketball in the 1970s. Those were all big deals for them breaking tradition, and they had already established tradition before that. So tradition is, and Smokey came in 1953, so Neyland was never around for Smokey. So again, the tradition was at some point old tradition. And also Tennessee embracing Rocky Top as a fight song. Guys, Rocky Top is a country song. It's an old outlaw folk song about killing police. Just listen to the lyrics on Rocky Top. Once two strangers climbed old Rocky Top looking for a moonshine still. Strangers ain't come down from Rocky Top, reckon they never will. That's literally about murdering federal officials. That's what that song's about. It was rap before rap. So I think Tennessee is very, very trendy in a lot of ways. I don't think they have to go extra with it. They don't have to do what Colorado does. And the Big 12 is going to have to go a little bit extra because it doesn't have the same level of blue bloods that the Big 10 or the SEC is going to have, nor the NIL money, which is what matters. So that's a big deal. I want to address a question. Charles McFall, does the Haslam family still contribute a ton of money? So yes, I believe they do. As a matter of fact, I think Bill Haslam is now on some board, the former governor. But Jimmy Haslam, the business school is named after him. I do think Tennessee has wrestled power away from Jimmy Haslam, though, because of the embarrassment of how he handled everything with Tennessee running it from about 2008 to 2017, and then the whole trying to force through the Greg Schiano hire. So I think at this point, he, not by choice, has kind of been forced to just throw the money and stay out of the way at this point. I do think that because Jimmy Haslam having his hands all over the program nearly ran into the ground. The same way he ran the business that his daddy gave him into the ground, quite honestly. And so I think that was a huge problem for Tennessee. And if you question that, look at the Cleveland Browns right now. I feel sorry for the Milwaukee Bucks. The Cleveland Browns took the massive PR hit to get Deshaun Watson onto their team, and they're still not going to the playoffs this year. So that's Jimmy Haslam for you. Jimmy Haslam has the unique distinction of, I believe, going, what is it? 0-6. He did go 0-6. He did have an 0-16 team. And I think he went 1-31 over 2 years owning the Browns. Just amazing accomplishments at failure. He's very accomplished at failing at what he does, if that makes sense. So he's accomplished at having no real accomplishments for himself. So yes, I'm sure he's throwing some money at Tennessee, but I think Tennessee finally has the right leadership in place to tell Jimmy Haslam, stay away from the program. You can contribute, write a check. That's it. We're tired of you. Because Jimmy Haslam was going to run it into the ground if he stayed in charge, because he did run it into the ground, quite frankly. He is the biggest reason for the decade of dysfunction. I think he forced through the Derek Dooley hire. He tried to force through the Greg Schiano hire. He wanted his puppet as athletic director, from Dave Hart to John Curry. He was just he was the Dan Snyder of college football boosters. And now he's the Dan Snyder of NFL owners because he owns an NFL team and he's failing miserably. And now he's going to be the Dan Snyder of NBA owners. So you just have to give, I think the leadership now is making moves for people that are questioning why they're trying to raise money elsewhere, including charging for the spring game. I think that's part of it. They don't want to be total slaves to one booster the way they had been in the 2000s and 2010s. And that's what they were with Jimmy Haslam. So I think it's a big deal. I think Tennessee is finding ways to stay trendy, but I don't think they actually have to do too much. Someone brought up a little while ago, G. Smith, you say, we are the real checkerboard team. I hated when Kentucky wore them. Yeah, but people saw that on Kentucky, and no one thought Kentucky's the checkerboard team. And look, I have to be honest. Blue and white checkerboard jerseys look a little bit better than orange and white. When it's orange and white, it looks a little lame, guys. I'm sorry. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Checkerboard end zone's great. Checker Neyland, great. But orange and white checker pants, I just don't think that works. I'm sorry. You got to know where your style works and where it doesn't. I know it looks good on me. Green looks good on me. Blue looks good on me. I'll be honest, orange doesn't look that good on me. Moving on, I want to talk a little bit about somebody that a lot of people on our chat room and message board absolutely hate. And his name is Kamal Hadden. So, if you're new to the message board, Kamal Hadden has been trashed by Tennessee fans after the way he played against South Carolina last year when he got wrecked by, I think it was Juice Wells, and cost Tennessee a shot at the college football playoff. And he deserved it because he was talking trash and then got destroyed. What a lot of Tennessee fans don't realize is that Kamal Hadden has dramatically improved this year. Now, again, on the highlight reel, you see some bad plays because you see that missed tackle against Florida, and a lot of people can't get over that. However, there is some information out there about Kamal Hadden that I think you guys should know about, because I think it's actually shocking how good he is, and I didn't see this coming. Kamal Hadden is 6th in the SEC in pass breakups this year with 6. He's 5th in the SEC with interceptions with 2. One of those was a pick 6 that put Tennessee in control against South Carolina. On the year, he's allowed just 10 catches for 64 yards. His overall PFF grade so far is 80.2, 4th best on the team. And most notably, Kamal Hadden is 9th nationally in his coverage grade by PFF at 86. Yes, Kamal Hadden is a top 10 cornerback in college football right now. You guys can hate on him all you want, but the numbers are clear. Kamal Hadden is balling out this year. So he is, I'm seeing the message board already come at me on this, but I'm sorry. Kamal Hadden is playing very, very well. He is far and away 100,000% the most improved player on this team right now. There's not a close second. Now, some people would bring up Wesley Walker as a reliable free safety. Wesley Walker wasn't much of an improvement, though, because Wesley Walker was very, very good towards the end of last year. Kamal Hadden was not, and now he is. I'm sorry, guys. Kamal Hadden's a good player. And I think this is one of the big reasons Tennessee's defense has taken a major step forward this year. Their secondary has actually been a lot better. We haven't noticed it as much, but their defensive backs have played very, very well. And honestly, I think Kamal Hadden is a big reason for that. Wesley Walker starting at safety is another one. No disrespect to Trey Flowers. I love Trey Flowers. He made a lot of sacrifices. He's a great player. He is somebody who is worth being commended. But Trey Flowers was playing with an injury or an illness at the end of last year, as we found out. So that really kind of messed him up. It's a Football Friday with Fred. I wanted to bring on Fred White to talk a little bit about this too. Fred, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. How about yourself?
Pretty good. Thanks for doing this with me today. Dave is flying to Massachusetts to see his son and enjoy October in the Northeast. And by the way, he's a Celtics fan, and I made the joke that I guess it's a holiday for them in Boston since they got Drew Holiday now. Fred, I wanted you to chime in on this because you were a defensive back. I want to get right to business. The message board's going at me because I am saying that the numbers have been out there and they show that Kamal Hadden is one of the best defensive backs in college football right now and a top 10 player in his PFF grade for coverage. What have you seen from Kamal Hadden this year?
I think he's a good football player. A few years ago, we looked at a guy by the name of Justin Coleman, and everybody thought, man, this kid, he gets beat all the time. Well, he's playing in the NFL right now. I think what the NFL scouts and what they're looking at are different things than what we see. How long does he cover? How long does he have to cover? Will he have to cover this long when he's in the NFL? With a good pass rush and those type of things? What is his technique like? Does he make the tackle? Those type of things make a difference as well. And how many times do people catch passes on him as far as like being open? Those are things that they look at as well. So, I mean, has he had a great season? He's had a pretty good year. I think it can get better. I'd like to see him get more interceptions, but based on sometimes when we're playing man-to-man coverage, it's hard to get interceptions in man-to-man coverage. Contrary to what the popular people may believe, it is very hard to get interceptions in man-to-man coverage. You mainly get interceptions out of zone coverage.
That actually makes sense because with zone, you can close in on the ball, whereas
Yes.
interception, you're having to guard one-on-one down the field.
Well, in zone, you usually have your back to the sideline and your face to the quarterback. So you're always seeing the ball being thrown. When you're playing man-to-man coverage, you focus on that man. You usually don't see the ball thrown.
You know, it's funny you say that because looking back at you guys, I rewatched, this was a few weeks ago, but I had rewatched the highlights from that 98 Florida game. Y'all seem almost exclusively in zone coverage in the secondary throughout that game, and y'all closed in so fast every time a receiver caught the ball on Florida that year.
Some of our defenses were zone coverages that turned into man. It depends on how far they ran down the football field. So once they've gone past 10 yards, now it turns into man. You cover that man. But it was a hybrid defense, something that guys don't even do much anymore, but I think it works even to this day. The teams that have done it, you look at what Alabama has done, they actually run a form of what we used to run at Tennessee. If you go to the NFL, you look at what the Patriots did with their great defenses. Mainly they ran a lot of zone coverages, but the one thing they did was it turned into man after so much time. How many yards down the football field or a certain route, those type of things, is it turned into man. I think that's one of the reasons why Peyton had issues with the Patriots, because they did run some of the same stuff we ran in college.
Oh, I never thought about that. Yeah, Peyton actually, he had said one time, he said that it wasn't that he had trouble figuring out the Patriots defense. He said they were just good. He said the defensive backs were just good. And it's and at the end of the day, sometimes football just comes down to they're just really good. Isn't it? And yeah, I actually, funny enough, the Seahawks game that the Broncos struggled in so much, I don't know if they ran zone, but their secondary was so elite. I didn't think Peyton was going to be able to just outsmart the secondary, and I didn't think that was going to happen. But that I did. Leading into the week, I kind of felt a loss might be coming because of that secondary and how good they play.
And I look at when it comes to most quarterbacks, when they come to the line of scrimmage, they change their plays, those type of things. They're looking at first movements. They're looking at what they see to be the defense right then, right? So when you come to the line of scrimmage, you make a check. Okay, you're going to identify the middle linebacker, then you identify what the safeties are doing to know whether it's a man-to-man coverage or zone coverage. If you can run your defense to where it's man-to-man or zone right out of the gate, all of a sudden it switches to zone, or all of a sudden it switches to man, it makes that quarterback think a little bit longer. You know what I mean? And that 1/2 second may cause a sack or an interception.
Yeah, and how much of that, all those crazy audible words Peyton Manning would throw at the line of scrimmage, how much of those were just dummy calls to try to get the defense to bite and change its formation?
Most of those, I don't know if they were dummy calls. Most of them have been their protection calls. He's calling out something to his linemen to make sure they understand where a certain person is, shaded, and where they're going. Or if he knows the safety is going to be in a certain position, he's telling his running back a certain thing to do, or as far as blocking or chip the defensive end coming up the edge there. Or also telling his lineman, hey, his receivers, this is what they're running. I need you to go to this, change your route to this coverage, change your route to man beater as opposed to zone beater. So those words do have a lot of say, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. Yeah, I got that. Sticking with Tennessee a little bit, have you been pleasantly surprised with the dramatic improvement in the secondary this year? I think they've been able to. Tennessee didn't really pressure Spencer Rattler last week, and the secondary just shut him down. I mean, we talk about the pass rush, and the pass rush was incredible, but I think the defensive backs aren't getting enough credit for how they played in that game.
Well, anytime you got a good pass rush, the secondary is better because it means he's getting the ball out faster. He's doing things with the ball that he wouldn't normally do. He's trying to figure out how to get that ball out of his hands, and that's what we want as a secondary. As a secondary, when you know you got somebody coming off the edge that's going to get to the quarterback, you know the ball's coming out faster. You don't have to cover as long, so it makes your secondary better. When your secondary has to cover for more than 3 seconds, that's when everything goes awry. The longer the quarterback has the ball in his hands, the more we can look at it. Think about something. Guys are running 4.3s and 4.2s and 4.4s in 40 yards. That means we're talking about 4-point-something seconds. So if you got to cover for more than 3 seconds and a guy's running that fast, yeah, it changes the way you had to cover somebody. And it changes your ability to be able to cover them. But you got pass rush coming behind that, and that ball's coming out in 3 seconds. That guy's never going to reach his full potential as far as speed-wise, and he can't run with so many different routes. That means the ball's coming out fast. One of the things we had was Deion Grant in the middle of the football field and Sean Ellis and those guys on the pass rush, Raynaud coming off on the blitz. We knew those balls were coming out fast, so Dwayne Givers can sit on a curl route or out route. If we didn't have that pass rush, you couldn't sit on those things.
Speaking of that, Rocky Top Tom is asking Fred if you can suit up against Alabama in 2 weeks. You want to do it?
I don't think they're going to need me. I think we're going to win that game anyway.
Wow, Fred already. Okay. Well, if Fred were playing today, guys, Fred, I wanted to ask you this because, Fred, you were apparently the find out opposing players' girlfriends. So if you were starting at safety and facing the Chiefs, what would you be saying to Travis Kelce right now?
Yeah, I was singing every song she has. Every time I made a tackle. But hey, listen, man, that's a bad boy, though. That doggone, hey, man, that's a bad boy.
Travis Kelce?
He can play the game. He's probably the best tight end to play the game, arguably the best tight end to play the game. And he's done a really good job. But, yeah, I would be – I got a lot of that gives me a lot of firepower. I don't know exactly any – I don't know – I don't listen to Taylor Swift. But I would before that week, I guarantee it. And I was singing every word.
And you would probably – I'm pretty sure you would tell him, Taylor Swift's going to break up with you and write a song about how bad you are at this, right?
I'm going to be her next boyfriend and her next hit.
Fred, I was talking a little bit about something before you came on, and I think you could give a lot of insight into this. Tennessee is going to bring back checker Neyland for Texas A&M. They did the dark mode uniforms last week, smoky grays earlier, all orange against UTSA. Do you think they're doing it right, or do you think they need to step up their game a little more for trendy things, given what Deion is doing out of Colorado right now for recruiting purposes?
Well, Deion's doing things completely different than everybody. I mean, just you look at what he's doing for us. I mean, you got Lil Wayne taking guys out, bringing them out of the tunnel. You got a concert before the game with Lil Wayne and all these, big name stars and stuff like that on the sidelines. I don't know if we need to take a page out of his book, but I would like to see a Morgan Wallen doing a concert before a UT game. That would be amazing. That'd be awesome. On the river or something like that, I think that would be amazing. But I think we stick to what we have and we try to find new ways to do what we're doing. And I like the fact that we did dark mode, also doing, check on Neyland, then all orange. I think those are good things, but it also is helping with marketing as well. I mean, what Deion's doing is what he has to do out in Colorado. I think our brand is a little bit different, and that orange and white does hold true. I mean, everybody knows when they see orange and white, it's Tennessee. You know what I mean? But having that dark mode, that gives you something different. It gives you an opportunity to go out and buy a different color shirt too. Just different paraphernalia to have, and it kind of appeals to everybody. Some people don't like the black. A lot of people do. Some people like the orange and white. Some people just like all white. Some people like the all orange. It gives everyone an opportunity to go out and purchase something that, represents the University of Tennessee. And it keeps us going as far as like having different options. One of the things that Oregon has done very well is have different options. And they have a different option every week. They can wear 100 different uniforms and, and never look the same. I think that has helped them with recruiting. And a lot of those kids go to school there because of those things. The different uniforms, the different looks and those type of things. Ultimately, it's still the University of Oregon. So it's still what it is. It still makes it good for them. University of Tennessee, we have that same ability, just having those opportunities to do those things.
Yeah, and that's why it was so funny to me when Dan – I don't blame him because he was trying to motivate his team, but when he said they're fighting for clicks, we're fighting for wins, I'm like, Oregon's been fighting for clicks for 30 years with those jerseys.
They have. They haven't won a championship. I don't know if they've ever won one. I doubt they ever will have one. But I think just having those options did help them get recruiting. And, just being able to light it up every week with a different uniform has given them opportunities for guys to go, I want to go play there. I like the look, And then you did have Chip Kelly. I'm not going to take anything away from him. He brought something different to college football with that fast-paced offense. But having those uniforms did help.
Yeah, it did. It definitely did. Maryland tried the same with Under Armour about 20 years later, and it didn't have the same effect whatsoever as the Oregon Nike one.
But the same thing, though, the guy who started Under Armour went to school at Maryland. So for those guys, it's a good idea. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I agree. It's kind of interesting. I kind of agree. That's what I had said earlier too, is that Tennessee doesn't have to do the same things, but they need to do certain things to stay trendy. And I've been saying, with Deion at Colorado and the Big 12 commissioner being the former executive of Rock Nation, watch out. We all talk about the SEC and the Big 10, but the Big 12 may be coming. They seem like they're trying a bunch of new stuff to just stay ahead of the curve in college football. And I think Big 12 football is going to be really exciting in the future, even without the blue blood.
I don't think they can do what Deion does himself because he's Deion. I don't think no one can do what Deion does because he's Deion. You know what I mean? It won't come the same from, TCU or Utah. Could you see Utah doing that? I don't see them doing it. No. You know what I mean? So, I think what Deion is doing is an anomaly. I think what he's doing is great for college football, but it also gives you opportunities to see all different types of things you can do when it comes to entertainment in college football. And I think it's going to change the landscape of how things are from now on. I think more coaches are going to go into doing things that, that are specific to their schools, I guess. But it gives you different opportunities for environment. I mean, you look at how our game stuff has changed with our new athletic director. Danny White has brought a lot of different things. The fireworks above the stadium before the game, and those are things that have brought more excitement. It's like one of the most exciting stadiums in the world now because of that. And you look at that because we didn't have that before. Now you have it, and it's like, wow, that made so much different. The different lighting when they light up the T when you run through it, that's a whole different experience. I think just doing those things and being innovative gives you opportunity to see things. You look at what we did in the stadium as well. You can go underneath the stadium there, and there's a whole area where you can get food and drinks and those type of things as well. You look at those are the things that help your stadium. You got to keep thinking innovative like that. I think more college stadiums are going to start to be more NFL-like because it's looking for more of the experience now than anything. And, back in the day, everybody didn't care about sitting on an aluminum stadium seats. Now, I'd much rather have a chair back.
Very true. I think Notre Dame still sticks with that because, Notre Dame, and this is probably why they haven't won a championship since '89. They're like, oh, my God, we're Notre Dame, and we can do everything traditionally. And they think that, holds up. And as you know, that's not the nature of college football anymore. You got to stay ahead of the curve.
You got to stay ahead of the curve. And that's the one thing. There's a lot of things coming down the pipe in the next few years here that I think we need to figure out a way to stay in front of. One of those things is you can pay players now. Any situation that you get to pay someone, whether it be in a job situation or whatever it is, what comes next? Just any idea what comes next?
Oh, you want to know how much you're going to get paid, right?
You want to know how much you're going to get paid. There's going to be a pay and scale, and also there's going to be a union at some point. So I think you should try to jump in front of some of those things as if you're University of Tennessee or any school in the college football right now, you need to figure out how to make things differently. How to look at those things going forward because it's not going to stay the same. You look from 5 years ago, University of Tennessee completely different than what it was back then. 10 years ago, completely different. 15, 20 years ago, everything is different, right? You can actually pay players now and not get in trouble to do so. At some point, I think there's going to be a salary cap. I also think there's going to be bonuses. I saw that Smoky Mountain Red. I agree. There's going to be bonuses. There's going to be incentive-laden contracts and those type of things. I see those things happening. So I think we need to figure out ways to stay innovative, but also stay ahead of the curve when it comes to the business side of this thing and try to jump out ahead of it.
But Fred, the most important thing is Tennessee's got to bring back the orange pants that Derek Dooley wore. Those were so successful.
Derek dude can take those pads with him. I'm glad he took them with him, and they just stay where they at. I'd much rather them stay where he is. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't think anybody's wearing orange pants again after that 3-year run.
I'm pretty sure nobody wants any orange pants after that dude.
Yeah. Before I let you out here, I actually wanted to ask you a little bit. I spoke with Spencer Riley on Monday. We always talk about it's next man up when a player gets hurt, but obviously there's an emotional side when one of your brothers goes down for the year, like what happened to Brew McCoy. But I think there's another layer for me when having watched Brew McCoy. It wasn't the DeMar Hamlin situation, but whenever you watch a scary injury, and you guys dealt with Jamal Lewis going down in 98. But then I think one thing that stood out to me was remember the Travis Henry injury in 99 when he landed on his head against Vanderbilt? Mm-hmm. And how do you mentally refocus yourself to continue a game when you don't even know if this person's going to be okay long-term and you got to finish the game?
Well, I mean, this mental toughness, really, I mean, it's something that's out of your control. I can't control what happens to a person when they get injured. All I can control is what I control. And if I'm prepared for my game to play, I got to go out there and play it. I just think that's just part of it. I watched Billy Ratliff get hurt too my senior year in 1999 against Auburn, and he was out for the year, broke his ankle. So, I mean, those are things that happen in the game. We know the game we signed up for. We know the game we played. At least back then we did. I don't know about now. I just know that back then we knew what we signed up for. So if you signed up to be a football player, you understood those things come with it. And then you got to get out there and figure out, how to get your focus back in the game and do your job.
Yeah, I totally understand that. It's always rough, hopefully Brew McCoy will be back stronger than ever next year. The one that always hits me is there's two of them. I'm sure you remember the Marcus Lattimore injury against South Carolina, Tennessee a few years ago. And then the Prothro injury against Tyrone Prothro against Florida in 2005, where Mike Shula had no business leaving Prothro out there on the field when they were up 31-3. Mm-hmm. And I always wondered how, and it's got to be mental toughness with you guys because it's, Travis Henry's was there. It ended up not being nearly as bad as it looked at the time.
Yeah. It was scary though. It was scary.
It was.
It was scary to see it happen. It was scary. We prayed for our teammate and we wanted to make sure he was okay. We didn't know what was going to happen. But like I said, we had a game to finish. Not that we didn't care about our teammate, but absolutely we did. It's like, look at Inky Johnson when he went down. Same thing. He wasn't my teammate, but his guys had to get back out there and play and finish the game as well. But you also go harder because of that guy. He got injured, man. We're going to finish this game for you. Make sure we don't, let you down. That's the one thing we knew from all those guys. Billy Ratliff, when he got hurt, he wanted to make sure, man, y'all go out there and kick their butt the rest of this game. Win this game for me. I'm not out here to help you, but win it for me. Make sure, you take care of business.
Yeah, I think after that Inky Johnson injury, that one was a scary, awful injury too. You're right. And I think that Tennessee has decided they are never playing triple option teams in the middle of the year again after that, because I know you had to play triple option once. It's got to be like you're in the middle of the season preparing for all these regular offenses, and then you got to totally change your game plan against that, don't you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because you can't play a triple option the same way you play Florida. That's not even Mm-mm.
Yeah.
No,
Fred, how can people get in touch with you?
You know what? They can give me a call at 770-381-0367. You can also reach us on social media platforms. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and that's also Twitter, Fred White Allstate. And they can check us out online. Just Google us. Or you can just say, Siri, get me Fred White Allstate in Georgia. I guarantee you she'll find me.
That's great. That is perfect. Fred, have a great weekend. Congratulations on your Braves again. Good luck to you guys in the postseason. Y'all got the first 40-70 player in history. 40 home runs, 70 total stolen bases.
Ronald Acuna, baby. Hey, this is Acuna's nation down here. I'm happy for that guy. I'm proud of him. And I'm happy for my Braves. But we are not done yet. We got to finish the job.
Can Acuna surpass Chipper Jones as the best everyday player, fully through Atlanta who won a championship?
If he wins another championship, he is the best player. Fully. Let me say that again. Let me go back. Rewind. There will never be a better player than Hank Aaron.
Oh, I agree with you on that. I just thought because he played primarily most of his career in Milwaukee, when the Braves were in Milwaukee. I meant full career in Atlanta was what I meant. Yes, Hank Aaron's the best. Don't get me wrong. I meant
Hank Aaron's the best. I think Chipper Jones is one of the best simply because he was a really good baseball player, but he's also from this area. He's from Atlanta. That makes him even more appeasing. It's hard for me to say he's going to pass him. I just want to put him right beside him on that mantle and tap his jersey right beside Chipper Jones and Dale Murphy and Hank Aaron.
Oh, it's a great Mount Rushmore right there. And then, of course, Bobby Cox and all his ejections.
and we got more than that. You got Smokes and Glavin and those guys also. So we got some good history down there in baseball. And Deion, absolutely. Who's for Deion?
That's right. And Fred McGriff. I remember those eras. Fred, have a great weekend off. Enjoy your time, or have a great, weekend not having to cover a Tennessee game. Put it that way.
All right, man. You have a good one, man. Go Vols.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Yes,
thanks.
sir.
Yep. Have a great one. See you later. That was Fred White. Really appreciate him for coming on. Guys, stick with us. I got one more thing to talk about. It's got to do with the SEC. And I think the SEC might be in just a little bit of trouble. Yeah, I said it. Trouble. We'll be right back.
Sun, sand, and salt water, the beach is a very relaxing place. Unless you wear contacts. Ow! Open your eyes to the best the beach has to offer with LASIK vision correction from Campbell Cunningham Laser Center.
Sports Treasures in North Knoxville is one of the South's largest sports cards and memorabilia dealers, featuring over 10 million sports cards from vintage to modern. Sports Treasures carries a full line of hobby boxes, singles, autographed memorabilia, Tennessee Vol collectibles, fan cave decorations, and so much more. See a museum full of collectibles at Sports Treasures, 4819 North Broadway in Fountain City, and Sports Treasures on Facebook. Sports Treasures, where the real sports fan goes to shop.
Have you seen the latest TriStar Hats Co. product?
TriStar Hats Co.? What's that?
You know, those really cool hats, shirts, tumblers, and even license plates with 3 stars like the official Tennessee flag and stripes like the American flag. Pretty patriotic if you ask me.
Gotcha. Seen those. Those are cool. Where can I get them?
Simple. TriStarHatsCo.com. And if you order now, there's 10% on any order $50 or more. Plus, use the promo code HOOKED.
With the promo code HOOKED, you get 10% off. That's hooked.
And don't forget free shipping with any order over $50. Stock up at TriStarHatsCo.com. That's TriStarHatsCo.com. There are plenty of wannabes out there, so make sure you go to TriStarHatsCo.com for the best quality and customer service.
Will do, and I'll be sure to use the promo code HOOKED. That's hooked when I do, to save an additional 10% off. TriStarHatsCo.com.
TriStar Hats Co. is a trademark of TriStar Hats Co. LLC. Any use without express written consent is prohibited. Welcome back to the show. Just wanted to address a question real quick from Charles McFall. Wasn't that, I believe you're referring to the Inky Johnson injury this season opener in 2006 against Air Force. Actually, no, and this is why it was ridiculous that they played Air Force during this time. It was the second game of the year. Their first game was against Cal, who was a top 10 team at the time. The next week after Air Force, they were going to play Florida, who was another top 10 team at the time. They decided to sandwich as a trap game between 2 top 10 teams, a game against a very disciplined service academy that runs the triple option. It was the stupidest scheduling in the history of scheduling for an SEC team. It made no sense. I want to dive in for our last topic on the SEC and the Big Ten. And the reason I want to dive in on this is because for those who don't know, the Big Ten has set their schedules, not like the dates, but the opponents for every team all the way through 2028. Meanwhile, the SEC hasn't even been able to get past 2024. Now, there's a couple reasons this is ridiculous. The SEC has 2 fewer teams than the Big Ten, or will have for their new scheduling next year. They have 16. Those 2 teams, to add them to 16, we've known about since 2021 when it was announced, and they were in the works to do it dating back to 2020. The Big Ten didn't get their 15th and 16th team agree to join until 2022, and their 17th and 18th team agree to join until this past year. Yet, somehow, the Big Ten has their schedule set through 2028, and the SEC can't get past 2024. This comes amidst the backdrop of the Big Ten securing a $7 billion deal for 7 years with multiple networks for television, and the SEC being stuck in a 10-year, $3 billion deal, meaning they're getting $300 million a year. So they're going to get $300 million a year for 10 years, while the Big Ten will be renegotiating after getting $1 billion a year for 7 years. So the Big Ten will be on a better deal for 3 years than even the one they're on right now, where they're making 3.5 times as much as the SEC. They'll be on a better deal after that for 3 years before the SEC can re-up its negotiation. And the SEC, by the way, is not going to re-up its negotiation. I don't care what anybody says. You guys, I'm sorry. They're not getting out of that contract with ESPN. They signed it. They're locked in, and ESPN has absolutely no incentive to alter that contract, particularly when they are failing as a business as we speak. This is ESPN. This is going to be ESPN's biggest cash cow. They got the steal of the century. While every other sports rights league was able to overpay its players because they fleeced ESPN, SEC let ESPN fleece them. And now they can't even get the schedule right. Partially because of the bad deal. They wanted to get more money for a 9-game schedule, and ESPN wouldn't pay out. Guys, the SEC is looking bad in negotiations. Greg Sankey is looking bad. He's not looking competent right now. And the Big Ten getting their schedule through 2028 only makes them look better. And here's why this matters even more. I don't care what anybody says. The grant of rights agreement with the ACC teams is not ironclad. It held together by a thread this year. Adding Stanford and Cal and SMU isn't going to change anything. Yes, we're in the San Francisco and Dallas markets, but Stanford and Cal have very apathetic fans. They've been getting caught with apathy. It's worse now because Stanford's bad, so they're going to have more apathy. SMU, I'm not sure what that... I know it's the Dallas market. I can't speak to how loyal SMU fans are going to be. All you did was increase your travel expenses more than anything else. Let's just put that out there. The ACC is going to fold. North Carolina, Virginia, Florida State, and Clemson. Those 4 schools, well, let me scratch. North Carolina and Virginia, those 2 schools will have their pick of the litter of where they want to go. SEC, Big 10, or Big 12. You guys may think that's crazy. North Carolina is a very, very, very valuable market. They bring a lot of academics in, and their potential is through the roof if they're in a bigger conference. Virginia is the highest revenue-producing program not in an SEC or Big 10 conference right now. Yeah, that's right. They beat Florida State. They beat Clemson. And so for the SEC, and they beat North Carolina. So for the SEC or the Big 10, whatever you value, Virginia's an AAU school, which is Big 10 value. So they bring academics, they bring a new market, and they would up the overall payout of your conference. It's the most, so everybody's going to be lining up to get Virginia. And I do believe everybody's going to be lining up to get North Carolina. Now, as far as the other schools that will probably be able to go elsewhere, Florida State and Clemson. I think Florida State and Clemson will go to the SEC. I do. I think largely because the Big Ten can add Miami, which is an AAU school. They can keep their values with AAU. So they would add Miami. But I do think right now, with the competency of the Big Ten, the real story here is this. North Carolina and Virginia. With the competency of the Big Ten, that the Big Ten is showing more than the SEC right now, the payouts they're getting, the fact that their schedules are set through 2028, the fact that they know exactly how they're going to approach everything they're doing. If you're North Carolina and Virginia and the SEC and Big Ten come calling, you're going to the Big Ten, guys. It's just that simple. You're joining the Big Ten. And I'm telling you, what does that do to the SEC? When the Big Ten expands its footprint to Virginia and North Carolina, the only 2 southern states of the old Confederacy that the SEC does not have a team in right now. It's not going to be a good look for the SEC. They are in big trouble long term. Now, there is Smoky Mountain Red brings up, it would be incredible to get all 4. I believe you're talking about Virginia, UNC, Florida State, and Clemson. Yes, that would be the SEC's desire. The SEC's desire would be to get Virginia, North Carolina, Florida State, and Clemson. That's what they want. That would be a perfect scenario. And you could do a 5-team 4-division conference where you have Florida State, Florida, Clemson, Georgia, South Carolina in one, Virginia, UNC, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Vanderbilt in the other, Alabama, Auburn, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and LSU, Arkansas, Texas, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Missouri. Someone came out with another great point. Kick out Missouri. Yes, that was an SEC misstep, but to be fair, with the SEC versus the Big Ten, this actually speaks to how much better run the Big Ten is than the SEC now. When the SEC made that misstep with Missouri, the Big Ten made a misstep with Rutgers and Maryland. Rutgers, Northern Maryland brings in money, the revenue that they need to. At least the SEC got Texas A&M out of the deal with Missouri, which does bring the revenue. So that's another big one. Question here from G. Smith. Could a reason be that the SEC took less money because the schools make more due to the SEC being the best conference, which probably sells more merchandise? I mean, that's not, they wouldn't take less money for that, though. No, I think Greg Sankey here's what's happened. The SEC's been getting fleeced out of a lot of deals. They got fleeced out of the CBS deal in 2001 because they signed a very long-term deal, and CBS was massively underpaying for the rights of the SEC, given what the SEC was bringing in. SEC was upset about it. They made it very known they were upset about it. They were so upset about it, they were not willing to even renegotiate with CBS after the deal was up. That was stupid. You put your personal feelings aside. I'm not saying stay on CBS. What I am saying is you say when we are up, we are a free agent, and you networks come crawling to us, and we will negotiate. They didn't do that. They were ready to get away from CBS, and ESPN came calling with a 10-year deal immediately because they were already tied to ESPN, and they jumped on it without even thinking. I do think that. And they did it with 14 teams, and then Greg Sankey was caught flat-footed because right after that, Texas and Oklahoma reached out to join the SEC, and he wasn't prepared. He put no stipulations in the contract of if the SEC would add more teams, if they were to go to more games, nothing. So they're stuck in a contract that's based on them not having Texas and Oklahoma, meaning they're actually, if you think about it, losing money by adding Texas and Oklahoma at this point, or they will be for the next 10 years, because it's 16 teams splitting $300 million per year versus 14 teams splitting $300 million per year. So they're technically not bringing any value. It's only going to help in the next round of negotiations. But by the next round of negotiations, the Big Ten will already be 3 years into their new round of negotiations, and they might have North Carolina and Florida and a few other schools, so they will be able to all ask for way more. What I'm saying is the SEC is in trouble of falling behind the Big Ten if they don't act fast. And the Big Ten getting its schedule set through 2028 only makes them look better. The Big Ten is shooting big right now. No pun intended. They just are. I talked about the Big 12, by the way, being forward-thinking with the executive of Rock Nation running the Big 12. Obviously, Colorado coming there next year is going to bring a lot of hype to the conference. I'm telling you guys, the SEC, Greg Sankey here's what's happening with Greg Sankey. He's just being a caretaker of an amazing product that you and I could be the caretaker of. It's not hard to run the SEC. To your point, G. Smith, the SEC is the best product by far. Sells the most merchandise, wins the most payouts. It's an easy product to run. Sometimes we judge people by results. People say judge people by results. That's so short-sighted. Sometimes results are easy to produce. Okay, if I became, it's the Phil Jackson rule. You know, Phil Jackson was head coach of the most talented teams of all time. That doesn't mean that he's a better coach than Greg Popovich or Larry Brown. He's not. He's had better talent. The results alone don't speak for themselves, and people need to start understanding that. Anybody on this message board could be commissioner of the SEC right now. Anybody. It ain't a hard product to sell. The same way anybody could be commissioner of the NFL when people brag about the money Roger Goodell has brought in because he has exponentially increased its value. No, the NFL increased its own value, and Roger Goodell just oversaw it. Okay, that's all that happened. Anybody could be commissioner of the NFL. Anybody could be commissioner of the SEC. These are very easy products to sell. It took effort, and it took creativity, and it took intelligence for the Big Ten to do what they did. And I'm telling you guys, the SEC is slowly falling behind. Speaking of North Carolina, too, and also falling behind, the NCAA has become, the reason this matters is the NCAA is becoming more irrelevant. For those who don't know, the other day, the NCAA yesterday, they reversed course on UNC receiver Tez. My mind just lapsed on his last name. Tez Walker, excuse me. Tez Walker had transferred to North Carolina, but because of when he transferred and certain rules, he did not get the eligibility waiver from the NCAA back in August, even though transfers can now transfer and play immediately. The NCAA has reversed course, and they have now said that Walker can play. And they tried to cover themselves by saying it's unfortunate that UNC failed to provide this information previously. We must be careful not to compromise a student athlete's right to privacy when it comes to sensitive issues. We want to assure the Division I membership and everyone watching how the new transfer rules are applied, that this meets the new transfer waiver standards. UNC's behavior and decision to wage a public relations campaign is inappropriate and outside the bounds of the process UNC's own staff supported. Had they not behaved in this fashion and submitted this information weeks ago, this entire unfortunate episode could have been avoided. I call BS. The NCAA released that statement. They're claiming that North Carolina, by waging a PR campaign, forced them to rule against Tez Walker at the beginning of the year. Now they reverse course. That's a lie. The NCAA is trying to flex its muscles to desperately figure out a way to stay relevant because they're slowly becoming more irrelevant, and eventually the schools in the SEC, Big 10, and Big 12 will break off and form their own league. However, when that happens, the SEC has to find a way to stay competitive with the Big 10 because, guys, they're falling behind. The SEC is falling behind. The greatest product in college athletics is falling behind in terms of creativity. And if you don't think this matters, let's talk recruiting for a minute, guys. The Big 10, with all this extra money coming in from TV, they can afford, their boosters can afford to spend more money on NIL because they don't have to spend money on things that the programs need. Meaning they can start to, meaning the Big 10 schools might have a lot more NIL revenue to spend in NIL initiatives than the SEC. On top of that, they might have more money to throw at coaches and pay some buyouts. These expensive buyouts are about to be a thing of the past because of NIL, but it may not be a thing of the past in the Big 10, giving them leverage to hire who they want. So portions of the program are brought to you by Zen Sports. Zen Sports is a new sportsbook in Tennessee, revolutionizing the way you earn sports betting rewards. That means no more deposit bonuses that turn into deposit nightmares. On Zen Sports, what you see is what you get. And with their cash rewards program, you get a lot of cash. For a welcome bonus, earn an unlimited 5% cash back on your betting volume for your first 15 days when you sign up with the code HOOKED. HOOKED. That's right. Unlimited 5% cash back. Keep betting and keep earning with up to 3% cash back on your betting volume every month after that. And refer friends to earn a percentage of their betting volume as cash rewards too. Zen Sports is bringing the cash back to Tennessee. So if you bet big on sports, you want to be betting on Zen Sports. Zen Sports betting just got better. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-889-9789. Must be 21 or over and in the state of Tennessee to bet. You guys all have a great weekend. I want to thank Fred White. I want to thank Josh Ward. I want to thank Caleb Gyro yesterday. I want to thank Jimmy Hyams on Wednesday, all who helped me carry the show without Dave Hooker this week. Dave will be back with me on Monday as we get set to preview Texas A&M week. Have a great time watching the games this weekend. Follow my bets. I covered them yesterday. We're going to get back on track. We're still over 52% for the year and over on our best bets and over 60% on all of our bets. So we're still rolling. And thanks to all of you guys for doing this. With Caleb Calhoun, this has been a presentation of Off the Hook Sports. You guys have a great weekend.